Sarah sighed softly. The chocolates you gave me on my birthday were also beautifully colored. She muttered softly, causing my heart to skip a beat. Those were the chocolates that led to our separation. Bright chocolates inspired by Sarah. Sarah looked down and pursed her lips. Her lips opened slightly, about that time. As soon as she began to speak. My name is Kyle. I'm a 30-year-old confectioner. Phew, it's done. Today, I'm working at a wedding reception venue. Oh, it turned out beautifully. A calm, low voice said from behind. I turned to see a dignified woman standing there. The bride's mother. She is also the master at the coffee workshop where I deliver my chocolates. A renowned master in our local area. Being addressed by Miss Sage, I naturally straightened up. I made it with all my heart. What do you think? As I asked, Miss Sage beamed with joy. I'm so glad I left it up to your young sensibility. Now, we have a seat for you at the reception, so go change and enjoy yourself. I headed to the dressing room. Today is the wedding of Miss Sage's daughter. After working at the reception venue, I'm also attending the wedding reception. As a business associate, she invited me. Honestly, it's a very large reception, and I'm nervous. I wonder if I'm out of place here. While feeling anxious, I completed the registration and received the seating chart. But it was hard to find my name on it. Going through the seats on the bride's side, I finally found my name at a table mostly filled with women. It seemed like most people at the table are the bride's friends. Then, I saw a surprising name next to mine. Sarah Thompson. Could it be the same person? It was the name of a woman I dated in high school, right next to mine. My heart ached slightly. However, why am I assigned to the friends table? As I entered the venue, I realized the business-related seats were filled with dignified, older individuals. I wouldn't have enjoyed being thrown into that table. It must have been Ms. Sage's consideration. I silently thanked her. As I looked around the vast reception hall and found my seat, my heart leaped. The woman listed next to me. She was dressed in a beautiful blue gown. I slowly walked forward and pulled out my chair. The woman in the dress turned quickly to look at me. Is that really you, Kyle? Long time no see. She must have been surprised to see my name as well. It's been a while. How have you been? Well, Sarah, looking slightly down with an awkward gaze, was very beautiful. Even in high school, without makeup, she was very cute and had a wonderful smile. It reminded me of our high school days. I was just entering high school, nervous. The first to speak to me with a lively smile, saying, "What's your name?" "I'm Sarah." "Call me Sarah," was her. Among girls our age, she was outstandingly cute, and I fell for her in no time. Our seats were close, so we naturally became friends, joined the same extracurricular activities and committees, and spent more and more time together. Eventually, we started dating. When I awkwardly asked her out, she confirmed sharply, "What? Say it clearly." "We're dating, right?" We started dating towards the end of our first year and continued smoothly, but our paths diverged. I was set to take over my family's confectionery shop after graduating from high school, while she was heading to college. We ended up in different classes, and after she stopped going to extracurricular activities, she increased her study time. The time we couldn't meet increased, which frustrated me, who was relatively free. Still wanting to cheer her up, I made her handmade sweets for her birthday. I practiced daily under my father's guidance and made bright yellow, festive chocolates that reflected her image. I thought she would be delighted with the chocolates I handed her, but she showed a slight disappointment. Then, she murmured, "Oh, it's not a cake." Indeed, cakes are standard of birthday. I was well aware that her favorite was strawberry shortcake. But I believed the chocolates I made were better. She quickly tried to cover, saying, "Oh, sorry. Is this handmade by you, Kyle?" "Amazing. It's beautiful," but her muttered words, "It's not a cake," deeply hurt me. After that, we gradually grew apart. Eventually, she broke up with me, saying, "I have to focus on my studies from now on." Sitting at my seat in the reception hall, those high school days flashed through my mind. I glanced at her next to me. From the lively high school girl, she had matured into a calm and composed woman. The light blue dress with subtle pink flowers scattered on it suited her very well. Her light makeup, based on pink tones, complemented her distinct features beautifully. She seemed softer, got changed from bright like yellow sunflower in high school days, which she was still stunning. She had been talking to the woman next to her, but when the woman left, she turned back to me. "I'm a friend of the bride from college, but how do you know her, Kyle?" When asked, I replied, through work. I know the bride's mom a little. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Wow. You're working with her? Amazing, that's Miss Sage, right?" I was shocked when I heard she was my friend's mom. Indeed, Miss Sage is well known. Eh? How did you meet? Through confections? I nodded. I met Miss Sage on a drizzly spring day. As a confectioner, and although my parents continued working, they had handed the business management over to me. So I was doing sales as a business owner too. Especially workshops, once they use our confections, they tend to keep ordering, which is great for our shop. I had been delivering regularly to a small classroom, but the orders weren't large enough to stabilize the business. I was constantly exploring ways to increase sales. Then one day, a woman came into the shop. "May I take shelter from the rain a bit?" It started pouring all of a sudden. As she entered, I was genuinely surprised. The woman was Miss Sage, who runs the largest workshop in the area. I had been struggling with daily shop management, always attending events like workshops whenever I saw one. What kind of atmosphere the event had, what kinds of confections were served. I once attended a workshop and the confections presented there were spectacular. Most of the local events are usually organized by Miss Sage. I used to dream about working with her someday. And now, she is right in front of me. She was taking shelter from the rain and intently looking at the sweets I made. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to burst. Excited, I started talking to her. She seemed a bit surprised that I know her, but when I mentioned that I usually attended the events, she praised me for being diligent. Encouraged by her words, I timidly spoke of my dream. Someday, at the biggest local event. I dream of seeing my confections on display. She looked slightly troubled. "I'm sorry. For important events, we usually use products from a well-established confectionery that we have a long relationship with." Her blunt response made me feel embarrassed and deflated, like a balloon losing air. However, she then added, "But I can tell they are very carefully made, your sweets. If they taste good, I might use them occasionally for smaller events. Could I try your confections?" Her kind words lifted my spirits to the sky. I shared these memories with Sarah. Getting feedback on my sweets from Ms. Sage really helps me learn. Not having any negatives would be ideal. But I'm actually happy when she points out things that could be improved. As I rambled on, she chuckled. "You're really working hard, aren't you?" Her comments suddenly made me feel shy. I was giddy like a child. It was the rain that connected you to her. I also started noticing you when we shared an umbrella on the way home. I had forgotten mine. That's right. My umbrella was an old one from my father, so it was large, and even with both of us under it, we weren't too close. But I, who was already infatuated with her, couldn't stop my heart from racing during our shared umbrella moment. As we got a bit quieter, the host's voice echoed. "It seems the bride and groom are about to enter." Sarah and I paused our conversation and focused on the entrance of the venue. The doors opened, and they entered. The bride's dress was mainly white but with some adjustments. Her softly set hair sparkled with accessories. The groom's tuxedo was also original. Sarah and I expressed our admiration and sent a generous round of applause to bless the newlyweds. The reception proceeded smoothly, and the bride and groom left the venue to change outfits. Since the bride's friend's table was all women, I felt a bit out of place and nibbled on the food and drink in front of me. Then, Miss Sage appeared with a drink. She was going around to each table, serving drinks. It must be hard with such a large number of guests. I greeted her lightly. "Once again, congratulations on today." Then, she poured wine into my glass and said, "The classroom is doing well thanks to you. Please enjoy yourself hereafter." She said this with a smile. Joy warmed my face. She greeted each person at the table and then moved on to other tables. As I relaxed, Sarah excitedly spoke up, "Hey. What?" I looked puzzled, and she waved her hands. What? What? To be spoken to like that by Miss Sage. How could one become such a person? She got too excited and her words were all over the place. Seeing her like that was so endearing that I couldn't help but laugh. There was a bit of a mix-up with Miss Sage during the autumn festival. Taking advantage of the host's announcement of "please enjoy yourselves," I decided to delve into another memory. It might have been about 2 years ago. Gradually, I had become closer to Miss Sage, and she had started entrusting me with the confections for smaller events. Sales were steadily increasing, and things were finally taking off. One clear autumn morning, the phone at the shop rang. It was Miss Sage, and unlike her usual calm demeanor, she sounded panicked. "It's a disaster. I messed up the order numbers for today's event. We're completely short. How many chocolates do you have at your shop?" There had been a plan to set up a coffee workshop at an autumn event, and the discussion had gone to Miss Sage. It was the first time trying this, so they really wanted to rely on the experienced Miss Sage, who promptly agreed. If it had been an annual event, the usual confectionery shop would have noticed the strange order numbers. But the confectionery shop hadn't thought it strange since the numbers weren't much different from usual. They needed 500 pieces, but only 50 had been ordered. That meant 450 pieces short. A flustered Miss Sage had asked around everywhere, but even with desperate efforts, they were still 300 pieces short. On the spur of the moment, I racked my brain. "Can you manage if I deliver 50 pieces at a time as they're ready?" She agreed to my proposal. Suddenly, the shop got busy. My mother mixed ingredients, while my father and I worked quickly to make the chocolates. My sister, who was married and had moved away, came to help immediately, helping with everything from preparing ingredients to deliveries. Thankfully, we managed to avoid a disaster, and it seemed we were able to provide chocolates to everyone who wanted them. Miss Sage graciously thanked us. We were almost at the brink of losing trust. These kinds of stories spread quickly. I really appreciate your quick thinking and for delivering such beautiful chocolates so swiftly. Her deep and graceful words made us forget the fatigue from our work. Since then, they started using our confections for slightly larger events, and then this led to being invited to her daughter's wedding, just like this. After I finished telling the story, Sarah's eyes sparkled. "That's amazing, that happened. How did you make all 300 pieces? Sounds overwhelming." I chuckled. "Well, I made sure they were quick to prepare. But I also worked on making them look vibrant with different colors." Hearing this, she exhaled softly. "The chocolates you gave me on my birthday, they had such lovely colors," she muttered, and it startled me. The chocolates that had led to our separation. Bright and cheerful chocolates inspired by her, featuring vibrant yellow with a touch of light blue. She looked down and pursed her lips. Her lips parted slightly, about that time. Just as she began to speak, the lights in the reception hall went out. Now, the bride and groom were about to re-enter, followed by the cake-cutting ceremony. She swallowed her words and whispered, "Let's talk later," then turned her attention to the entrance of the reception hall. The bride and groom reappeared, this time in vivid attire. The bride wore a dress that suited her perfectly, a striking shade of red. The groom was in a crisp navy blue suit that matched his handsome features well. At that moment, she stood up and grabbed my arm. "Shall we go take a picture?" She invited me with a smile, but "No, I'm good. That sort of thing is more for the ladies." As I tried to refuse, she insisted even more strongly and pulled my arm. She said, "You know, these things are more fun with more people." With that, she forcibly got me to stand up from my seat. Even though her appearance had calmed down, it seemed her somewhat tomboyish traits hadn't changed. Feeling a bit awkward, I joined the crowd gathering around the bride and groom. As the host gave a flamboyant signal, the covering was removed. What appeared? Atop the highest pedestal were chocolates shaped like the bride and groom, surrounded by a colorful array of sweets below. All the chocolates were beautifully decorated. A loud cheer erupted, and I secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Yes, this was the wedding sweet tower that I had created, employing all the skills I currently possess, after being requested by Miss Sage. The bride had expressed a desire to have chocolates and to enjoy coffee prepared by her mother and the students from her mother's class as the main feature. And that major role had been assigned to me, not to a well-established confectionery shop. When I first heard the request, I was surprised, but they said they trusted my sensibilities, and that's how it came to be completed. I thought to myself, this might turn into a bit of an advertisement. As I watched the bride and groom, the host announced, "These chocolates are the work of confectioner Kyle." Suddenly introduced, applause filled the venue. Sarah looked at me in surprise. I wonder what my face looks like right now. Probably the silliest face in the world. I wish they had told me they were going to introduce me. As I was about to blush and look down, the bride shouted, "Thank you for creating such a wonderful sweet tower." My chest warmed with emotion. While the enthusiasm in the hall hadn't yet faded, the lowest pedestal of the tower was cut into, and then coffee was served. As the chocolates were distributed and coffee was served. Noticing my gaze, Sarah smiled slightly. "I'm also learning coffee, though not at Ms. Sage's class." I was surprised. As if reading my thoughts, she began to speak. "Even after we broke up, I couldn't forget about your work and wanted to understand it. Right after entering university, I joined an organization which we can learn about coffee. We can eat the sweets there, right?" she said, chuckling. Trying to understand my work, those words warmed my heart. Then I found it profoundly interesting. She said with a playful stick of her tongue out, "I shouldn't have stared so much at the sweets, but they were really beautiful and lovely. I had a hard time choosing which one to take." "Kyle, you're amazing." Being told that, my lips couldn't help but form a smile. Maybe I had always wanted to be recognized by her. From that day she was disappointed it wasn't a cake. All this time, I made up my mind and said to her, "Would you come to my shop tomorrow night?" At that, she looked surprised. It didn't have to be tomorrow, but I wanted to express my feelings as soon as possible. She nodded. "The location hasn't changed, has it?" I answered with a smile. "Of course not." After the reception concluded, I hurried back home to shape my feelings into something tangible. The next day. The sun is going down early these days. Closing time was approaching, and the surroundings had grown quite dark. As I took in the shop sign, I scanned the area. Then, from the distance, I saw a woman approaching. It was Sarah. She was walking gracefully towards me, dressed in a crisp, light pink outfit. When she spotted me, she smiled and gave a small wave. I invited her inside the now closed shop and had her sit in the small eating space. She looked around the shop. It's changed a bit. There was no eating space before. She remembered the shop from our high school days. I felt a bit embarrassed, and silence fell between us. I was also mesmerized by how beautiful she looked today. Just as she had in her glamorous dress the day before, this outfit suited her just as well. It was her who broke the silence. "Kyle, you've become really cool, it surprised me." Her words made my heart skip a beat. "You also look really beautiful." As I stumbled over my words, she laughed. "You're still as bad at speaking as ever." Then she pursed her lips tightly. A habit she had when she was about to say something difficult. I meant to say this yesterday, but back in high school, on my birthday. I'm sorry I hurt you." I shook my head slowly. But she continued. "It was awful of me to be disappointed. I've felt terrible about it. Even now, I regret it. Back then, you made such wonderful chocolates by hand. And I didn't appreciate the meaning or the effort. Her voice trembled slightly. I hoped she wouldn't cry. "I've always wanted to be recognized by you, Sarah. You were disappointed because my chocolates couldn't compete with the shortcake you wanted." As I said this casually, she shook her head vehemently. "It's not like that." I interrupted her. I used that moment as motivation to work harder. It hurt at the time, but wanting to make something that would make you happy became my driving force. Even the sweets I make for Ms. Sage. I imagine if they would make you smile. Sounds creepy, I know. I always thought, if I had made this back then, would it have made you smile? I glanced at her face to gauge her reaction. She didn't seem to find it creepy. While talking, I moved behind the counter and picked up something, covering it with my hands as I brought it over to her. It was my masterpiece. The colors were a mix of pink and blue, a gentle hue. It was a slightly larger chocolate, intricately crafted. As she reached out to take it, her hand trembled. Looking into her eyes, I saw her in tears. As she took the chocolate from my hand and examined it, a single tear rolled down her cheek. "It's beautiful." Hearing those words filled my heart. "Did you like it this time?" I asked gently, and she nodded vigorously. "I made it with your current image in mind. Back in high school, it was vibrant yellow and blue. Now, it's like petals fluttering in a calm blue sky." As I said this shyly, she chuckled. "You don't sound like someone who's bad at talking. Did you practice?" She hit the nail on the head, and I was taken aback. No, I hadn't practiced. I had only repeated it over and over in my heart. "To think you'd hold such a beautiful image of me after all the awful things I said." "Kyle, you're too kind." She said this with a sniffle. "Sarah, you try to understand me, someone who disappointed you, by studying coffee. That's kind of you. Maybe we could try again?" Her eyes widened in surprise. "I think if you were by my side, I could improve myself even more. I want to keep creating things you like, things that make you happy. Things that make you smile, right beside you. Is that okay?" Tears started to spill from her eyes again. Me? After what I did? I was exasperated. "I'll say it as many times as it takes, you didn't do anything awful. We were just kids back then. And hearing that you've grown fond of sweets in your own way, well, that makes me fall for you all over again." Her face turned bright red. "I'm happy. I fell for you all over again yesterday. Hey, do you have a coffee set?" My face lit up as I stood. "Yes." "Are you going to make coffee?" She nodded with a smile, so I prepared the coffee set. In the quiet shop, the sound of making coffee was soothing. "It feels too precious to eat," she said, looking at the chocolate I had given her. "I can make it for you every day." As I said this, her eyes sparkled, and she carefully cut a piece and took a bite. She closed her eyes, savoring the taste, and then let out a sweet murmur, "Delicious." While secretly knocked out by her smile and voice, I too ate some of the chocolates. Then, I reached for the coffee that she had made. I slowly brought it to my lips and took a sip. It was delicious. She also drank the coffee she had prepared inside contentedly. Having her in my shop, making coffee, felt like we were a young married couple. I hoped that someday, this could really be us. With that thought, Sarah and I slowly savored our coffee together.